Chapter 41, Winterfell, 293 AC. Ned sat in his solar when Alan knocked at the door, bringing news that Jon's party had been spotted. Nodding to his guard, he called for Vayn to prepare the household for their arrival. A mix of excitement and anxiety churned within him as he thought about seeing Jon again after 4 long years away from home. What would his boy be like? Had he changed? Did he know the truth? These thoughts raced through Ned's mind as he made his way to the courtyard. When he first heard of Jon's remarkable deeds, pride swelled in his chest. To see Jon reach his potential was more than he had ever dared to dream. Yet, with that pride came the same worries he had always felt. Fame attracted attention, and attention brought questions. If Robert were ever to ask the right questions, Jon's life, and by extension, Ned's and his family's, could be in danger. Thankfully, it seemed Jon's accomplishments had not drawn unwanted scrutiny, and Ned breathed a sigh of relief, though he still faced other challenges. Catelyn constantly complained about Jon, referring to him as the boy and never by name, especially when he could hear her. She had called him a bastard, of that he had no doubt. As news of Jon's achievements reached Winterfell, Catelyn became convinced it was part of a master plan to usurp Winterfell from Robb. Ned knew in his heart that this was the last thing Jon would ever consider. Besides, if Jon were to claim what was rightfully his, Winterfell wouldn't be the prize he sought. A smile crept across his face as he saw his children lining up in the yard, eagerly awaiting Jon's arrival. Sansa looked resplendent as always, while little Arya appeared eager for a new experience. Bran seemed nervous, and Robb and Theon were laughing and joking as usual. Yet Catelyn's expression was tense, as if she might burst. Her features were schooled, but Ned knew he would soon hear her grievances once again. He sighed as he watched them. In all their years of marriage, the only serious disagreements Ned and Catelyn had ever had were about Jon. It was the only time he had truly lost his temper with her. "Father, are they really here?" Sansa asked, her excitement palpable. "Aye, my love, they are," Ned replied, listening to the sound of hoofbeats echoing on the pathway to the keep. Taking his place beside Catelyn, he turned toward the gate and caught sight of the blonde hair of Jaime Lannister, accompanied by a brown-haired boy. But then, he saw something he had never expected to see in Winterfell, an enormous white wolf. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people laid eyes on it. A dire wolf, it was true, his son had a dire wolf. A smile broke across Ned's face at the sight. Moments later, he spotted Jon. His son had grown taller and appeared more filled out. Jon's hair was longer than Ned had anticipated, and when their eyes met, Jon's smile struck Ned like an arrow to the heart. It was the same smile he remembered from his sister. As Jon dismounted and made his way toward them, Ned felt his heart race, his mouth suddenly dry. "Lord Jaime, welcome to Winterfell," Ned said, nodding in greeting. "Thank you, Lord Stark, but we both know it's not I you wish to see," Jaime replied with a smirk. "Lord Stark," Jon said with a nod, and Ned frowned at the formality. "Jon, welcome home, son," Ned said, hoping for a warmer response, but instead, Jon introduced the boy beside him. "May I present Lord Loras Tyrell, my lord," Jon said, smiling as Loras stepped forward. "A pleasure to meet you, my lord," the young boy said politely. Then Jon introduced Howland's 2 children, Mira and Jojen. Ned was surprised they had traveled with him, and he could sense the grimace on Catelyn's face without needing to look. "Lady Stark," Jon said respectfully. "Jon," Catelyn replied, and Ned could hear the strain in her voice. "Robb," Jon said softly. "Snow," Robb replied stiffly, prompting Ned to glare at his son. "Little sister, look at you. You've grown so much," Jon remarked warmly. "It's good to see you, Jon," Sansa said, her manners impeccable. "Now that's no way to greet your brother, is it?" Jon teased, and Ned felt his heart swell as Sansa squealed with excitement, enveloping Jon in a large hug after he whispered something in her ear. "Arya, is it really you?" Jon asked, surprise evident in his voice, which puzzled Ned. Who else would I be? The little girl replied, prompting laughter from those around them. Is that your wolf? She asked, glancing at the creature. You want to meet him? Jon inquired. Can I? Arya's voice brimmed with wonder. Of course, Jon said, and Ned watched as the wolf, which had been sitting quietly by Jon's horse, stood up and approached them. Its size became even more apparent as it drew nearer. Ned, the children. Catelyn called out. I assure you, Lady Stark, that Ghost won't harm them, Jon replied, and Ned shook his head at Catelyn, urging her to let it be. She complied, albeit reluctantly. While Jaime and Loras introduced themselves to everyone, and Sansa stumbled through her words meeting the Warden of the West and the Tyrell boy, Ned noticed Theon and Robb giggling as the Reeds passed by. He would need to speak to them both later. He would not tolerate disrespect towards Howland's children. He observed as Arya and then Bran ran their hands down the wolf's fur, while Jon helped a clearly nervous Sansa do the same. He's so soft, Sansa exclaimed. Little sister, he is, Jon replied. Lord Jaime, I've made some rooms available for your men in our barracks. Jory can show them the way. Vayin will guide you, Lord Loras, and Howland's children to their rooms, Ned announced, still focused on Jon. I thank you, Lord Stark. And Jon? Will he stay in his old room? Ned asked. He would have commented on the look Jaime gave him, but something else caught his attention. Farlan will take the wolf to the kennels, Catelyn said. Ghost sleeps with me, my lady, Jon replied firmly. Ned sighed. He had hoped the pleasantries would last longer. I will not have that filthy beast in my halls, near my children, Catelyn declared haughtily. Ghost is not a filthy beast, my lady, Jon shot back, glaring at his wife. Ned, surely you can't allow this, Catelyn insisted. He sighed again. There would be more battles ahead, and this wasn't a hill worth dying on. Catelyn is right, Jon. It's too dangerous to have the wolf in the keep. We'll find a good spot for him in the kennels, Ned said, trying to reason with his son. Lord Stark, Ghost stayed with Jon in White Harbor and in Last Hearth without incident. Neither lord felt the need to protect their children from him, Loras Tyrell interjected, stepping closer to Jon. Father, look. He's friendly, Sansa said. To prove her point, she knelt down and giggled as the wolf licked her face, all her earlier nervousness now gone. It's just a damn beast. Who cares where it sleeps? Theon suddenly piped in, though his look made Jon step back. I think it's for the best, Jon, Ned said, glancing at his son, hoping he would see reason. Very well, Lord Stark, Jon replied, and Ned breathed a sigh of relief, though it was short-lived. He watched in shock as Jon, rather than allowing the wolf to be led away, turned and mounted his horse. Loras followed him, along with Ghost. It took Ned a moment to realize they intended to leave. It was only when Lord Jaime nodded to him and mounted his own horse that the reality of the situation hit. He looked over to see Sansa on the verge of tears, while Catelyn stood there with a satisfied expression. He couldn't allow this. Jon. Wait, Jon said as he moved closer. It's fine, Lord Stark. I'm sure we can find somewhere in Wintertown, and we can still visit. Do I have your word that the wolf will be under control, son? Ned asked. You do, my lord, Jon replied, and Ned nodded in agreement. When Jon dismounted this time, Ned made sure he was taken straight to his room. He didn't want to give Jon the chance to change his mind again. He noticed the happy smile that appeared on Sansa's face, and how Arya and Bran followed their sister and Jon toward his room. Catelyn glowered at him, but Ned shook his head, deciding to deal with that later. As the others were shown to their rooms, he motioned for Robb and Theon to join him. I saw you with the Reeds. You'll both behave better than that, do you understand? He said. Aye, my lord, Theon responded. Yes, father," Robb added. "Now, why don't you get ready to show your brother around?" "It's been a long time since you saw him," Ned said, and Robb nodded before he and Theon walked away. Ned entered the keep and made his way to his solar, knowing that Catelyn would either be waiting for him there or would arrive soon. He braced himself for their inevitable argument, which would cover all the same topics: how Jon was trying to steal Winterfell, how he'd shamed her brother. That particular issue alone would occupy most of the day, he knew. As for what had happened in King's Landing, he found it hard to believe Kat's account. That didn't sound like his boy. "He's not your boy," a voice in the back of his mind whispered. But Jon was his son, and Ned struggled to reconcile the actions in King's Landing with the boy he knew, different though Jon clearly was now. Jon entered his old room, accompanied by his sisters and brother. He was surprised by how small and bare it felt. Had it always been this way when it was his? As his things were brought in, he couldn't remember. But compared to the rooms he had stayed in since then, this one certainly felt the most lackluster. Still, there was something comforting and familiar about it, and as he sat on the bed, a smile spread across his face. "So, I expect you want your presents, little sister," Jon said, glancing at Sansa. "What?" "No. I mean yes, but that's not why I'm here, Jon," Sansa replied. Jon reached over to hug her again. "I know that. I'm so happy to see you again, Sansa." "I missed you," he said, watching her smile grow. "You too, you little terror," Jon said with a chuckle as he grabbed Arya and began to tickle her, much to her delight. "Did you miss me, Jon?" Bran asked, his voice small. "Of course I did," Jon replied, turning his attention to his brother and tickling him as well. "He's so well behaved," Sansa remarked, glancing at Ghost, who was lying quietly by the fire. "Sometimes he's really not." "Now, about those presents," Jon said, getting up to walk to his chest. The first set he pulled out was for Arya, and he had thought long and hard about these. He knew what Sansa liked, and he could guess what Bran would appreciate, but when Sansa spoke of their baby sister, she described a girl like no other. Ribbons and dresses, fabrics, and pretty things wouldn't suit Arya, so Jon had chosen a couple of other gifts instead. The first was a book of drawings he had made: Casterly Rock, Lannisport, Castamere, King's Landing, Ghost, the Pinnacle ships, Wind Wheels, and more. All the places and things he had seen since leaving Winterfell. When he handed it to her, Arya looked at it in amazement. "Thank you," she said, smiling, before he handed her the second present. "I had this made for you in Lannisport," he explained as he presented her with a wolf pendant, a shining silver wolf with golden topaz stones for eyes. "Really? For me?" Arya exclaimed, jumping up to wrap her arms around him. For you." When Arya finally let him go, Jon reached back into his chest. Jon reached into his bag to pull out Bran's gifts. Like Arya, Bran received a wolf pendant, but this one was special, featuring quartz for its eyes. His other present was an elaborate set of soldiers, horses, catapults, and dragons. These figures had originally belonged to a ASOIAF set, but Jon had commissioned more, so now there were over 40 of them. "Do you like them, brother?" Jon asked. "These are mine, just mine." Bran replied, his eyes wide with excitement. They are," Jon confirmed. "Thanks." Bran exclaimed, quickly grabbing the present as if afraid it might be taken away. Jon couldn't help but laugh at his enthusiasm. Turning to Sansa, who eagerly awaited her own gifts, Jon smirked. He might have gone a bit overboard this time. Sansa also received a wolf pendant, but the gems in the eyes of hers were the most elaborate of all, cat's eyes that seemed to look right back at you. Her next present was a golden locket on a delicate chain, beautifully engraved with a wolf standing tall, howling at a small moonstone. Jon had also picked out some exquisite fabrics in Gulltown. When Sansa ran her fingers through the Myrish lace, her smile lit up the room. The selection of other fabrics made her eyes widen in delight. John, this is too much, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Not for my little sister it isn't, John replied, grinning as she beamed back at him. He helped her carry her presents down to her room, with Arya and Bran trailing behind. John held Robb's gift in his hand, hoping to see his brother in the family wing. As they walked, they encountered Loras, who appeared to have settled in but looked rather bored. Lady Sansa, Loras said with a respectful bow upon seeing them. Lord Loras, Sansa replied shyly, curtsying, while Arya giggled and Bran paid no attention. Where are Jojen and Mira? John asked. Mira's not feeling too well, so Jojen decided to stay with her. I think she's just tired, though, Loras said, and John nodded in agreement. When they reached the children's rooms, Arya left the book in her room and quickly rejoined them. Bran headed to a different room that already had some toys, eager to play with his new ones. Sansa invited them into her room to set their gifts on her table. John was immediately struck by the difference between her room and his own. While his was small and bare, Sansa's was vibrant and inviting. The furniture, the bed, and the bedding were all of much better quality than his. Her room felt brighter and warmer, and though John didn't begrudge his little sister anything, it highlighted the contrast in how they were both treated. After leaving her room, they finally came across Robb and Theon. The Ironborn wore a smug grin as he looked at both John and Loras. John handed over the presents he'd brought for his brother. Just like the others, Robb received a wolf pendant, this one with garnet eyes. John had also gotten him an ironwood bow, which had taken considerable effort and coin to have the wood delivered. Thanks, Snow, Robb said, his tone half-hearted. Robb, Sansa interjected, clearly annoyed. What? That's the best you can do? After John brought you a present, you can barely thank him. I did thank him, didn't I, Snow? Robb replied with a smirk. His name is John, Loras said angrily, but John looked at him and shook his head, signaling him to hold back. He's a bastard. They're called Snow, Theon said, maintaining his smug expression. He's our brother, Sansa exclaimed loudly. Whatever, Robb said dismissively as he and Theon walked away, leaving the bow and pendant behind. I'm so sorry, John. I don't know what goes through his head sometimes. And as for Theon, gods, Sansa said, her frustration evident. Just then, Arya rushed over and picked up the bow, examining it with keen interest. Can I have it? Arya asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. John chuckled, making both him and Loras laugh. I think we'd better leave it for your brother, little wolf, John said. Arya shot him an annoyed look. But she began, just as he took the pendant off her. Maybe we can have a smaller one made for you, eh? John suggested, tousling her hair. Her face lit up with a beaming smile. John carried the bow and pendant back to his room and set them down before hurrying to catch up with Sansa and Loras, who had headed outside. His sister was eager to show her friend more of their home. Arya, however, hadn't left his side. As they walked together, she kept running her little hand through Ghost's fur, her fingers only reaching the wolf's side as he towered over her. When they finally caught up with Sansa and Loras, they were walking toward the glass gardens. John and Arya joined them, while Ghost wandered off in another direction, much to Arya's dismay. Where's Ghost going? She asked, frowning. He does that from time to time, little wolf, John replied. John, I was just about to show Lord Loras the flowers. He doesn't believe we grow them here, Sansa said with a smirk. Then I think he's in for a big surprise, little sister, John said, reaching down to take Arya's hand as they entered the glass gardens. It's so warm. John, why didn't you tell me there were warm places like this in the north? Loras exclaimed, his eyes closed as he soaked in the newfound heat. Maybe we should move his bed out here. What do you think, Sansa? John said, shooting a teasing glance at Arya, who giggled. What? No, we couldn't. He's a lord, Jon. Wait, you were joking, Sansa said, laughing as she caught his expression. Only half a one. Trust me, I wouldn't be surprised if we find him here a lot, Jon replied, watching Loras sit down on a bench and lean back. You have the truth of it, Loras said, prompting both sisters to laugh. Out of the corner of his eye, Jon noticed something and walked toward it, almost in a daze, as the winter sun began to set. Roses shimmered in the light, their blue hue clearer and sharper than he had ever remembered. Jon's hand reached out almost instinctively, his fingers brushing against the soft petals. As tears welled in his eyes, he quickly wiped them away, not wanting to explain why he was crying in a glass garden. When Loras approached, Jon smiled at him and pulled out his knife to cut 3 of the flowers. He tucked one into his pocket and walked over to his sisters with the other 2. For my 2 beautiful sisters, Jon said, handing each of them a winter rose. Thank you, sir, Sansa replied, curtsying with a smile. It was my pleasure, my lady, Jon responded with a bow, eliciting a laugh from Sansa. Arya looked at him quizzically as she held the flower in her hand, so Jon knelt down, gently took it from her, and tucked it into her hair. Now you look just like a fierce and beautiful little wolf, he said, and Arya smiled, laughing as he tickled her. Stop it, get off, she exclaimed, giggling louder. My lady, shall we leave these ruffians? Loras said with a smirk, offering his arm to Sansa. Why, thank you, brave knight. I fear for what they may do to us, Sansa replied playfully. Have no fear, my lady. I shall protect you from the wolves, Loras said, laughing as he and Sansa strolled out of the glass garden. Apparently, we're ruffians and wolves. What to do? Jon mused before kneeling down so Arya could climb onto his back. They waited until Sansa and Loras had left before Jon dashed outside, Arya clinging to his back as she shouted, Faster, Wolfie. Faster. Jon raced past Loras and Sansa, both of whom were doubled over in laughter. Meanwhile, Catelyn was furious. That boy had just arrived, and already Ned was taking his place. He had humiliated her in the courtyard when all she had been trying to do was protect her children from the bastard's beast. She had waited as long as she could, despite her efforts to calm herself. With sewing, it hadn't worked. She needed her husband to see clearly what she already knew, the bastard was up to something. When news arrived about the events in King's Landing, she stormed into her husband's solar to tell him how his bastard had tricked and shamed her brother. He had spread horrible lies about her family. In some ways, she felt relieved. It confirmed everything she had ever thought about the bastard and his nature, proving exactly why she needed to be wary of him. But instead of listening, Ned made excuses for the boy. He insisted there must be some mistake. Hadn't she heard it in her own brother's words? Yet that still hadn't been enough for her husband to take action. Even when word came that the bastard was traveling to Winterfell, Ned refused to heed her warnings and prevent him from coming. It was bad enough that he was traveling with Jaime Lannister, but the fact that he had somehow befriended the Tyrell boy made it even worse. Her children should be friends with the first and second richest families in the realm, not Ned's bastard. She had felt a spark of happiness when the raven arrived from the Tyrells, announcing that their son would be visiting. Though she was disappointed it wasn't the heir, he would have made a worthy match for Sansa, who certainly shouldn't be wasted on a third-born son. This boy could serve as an introduction to the Tyrells. Robb could befriend him, and perhaps they could arrange a visit. If not the heir, then maybe the daughter. Yes, that could work out well, she thought. Lady Marjorie would be a good match for the future Warden of the North. But then she read that he was in the company of the bastard. Why is he with the bastard? She asked Septa Mordain. They are tricksters, my lady. Perhaps he has enraptured the boy, the Septa replied. But he's trueborn. Surely he knows all about their ways. He's just a boy, my lady. Lady, perhaps he hasn't been paying attention to his lessons, Alan suggested. I shall have to welcome him all the same. Maybe once he sees Robb and spends time away from the bastard, he'll realize the truth. That sounds like a wonderful idea, my lady. He could spend time with Lady Sansa too. My daughter will marry an heir, septa. Nothing less. Of course, my lady. I just meant that perhaps if he was allowed to spend time with Lady Sansa, he might mention his sister while speaking to her. Yes, that and befriending Robb. Lady Marjorie could visit, she and Robb. Oh yes indeed, that's a most excellent idea. But already she could see that there was no way she'd allow that boy near her family. He was far too much under the bastard's spell, especially after what had just happened in the courtyard. Both he and Lord Jaime were. But there was nothing she could do about them, they were trueborns and lords. No, it was only the bastard she had power over, though he no longer seemed to think so. As she stormed toward her husband's solar, she resolved to make it clear to him that she did have power. She would not tolerate him walking around after humiliating her like that. Is my husband inside? She asked Alan as she reached the door. Aye, my lady, Alan replied, knocking and opening the door for her. She walked inside and saw her husband sitting at his desk, reading a raven scroll. She watched as he winced, then smiled, and then winced again before putting the scroll down to look at her. My lady, please take a seat, Ned said. She sat down, even though she had intended to stand. I won't have it, Ned. I won't have him here. You saw what he did, she said angrily. And what would you have me do, Cat? Send him away? You think if I do that, Jaime Lannister won't leave too? Him and the Tyrell boy, perhaps even Howland's children? They made it very clear in the yard what would happen if the wolf wasn't allowed to stay with Jon. How do you think they'd react? Are you really going to react to me sending Jon away? She asked, her voice thick with frustration. It doesn't matter anymore. He humiliated me in public, and you're just going to let it stand. Do I mean so little to you, my lord? Of course not. You are my wife. I wouldn't want you shamed more than I already have, Ned replied, his tone gentle but firm. But you're mistaken, Cat. The wolf is no problem and certainly no danger to our children. He picked up 2 pieces of paper. This is a raven from Lord Umber, and this is from Lord Manderley. Jon and his companions stayed in both their houses, and these ravens are full of praise for him and his wolf. He smiled briefly before his expression turned serious again. Why was he staying with the Umbers? I told you this would happen. He's making friends with your bannermen, and you're doing nothing about it. Cat's voice was rising with agitation. What would you have me do, Cat? Tell them to turn down the deals he's brought to them? To refuse the coin he's brought to the north? Bear Island alone is soon to be as wealthy as the Manderleys from their deal, if what Wyman says is true. The Great John writes of a deal to sell ice, which I don't fully understand, but if it's true, then the North can only benefit. My bannermen wouldn't take kindly to me forbidding these deals. Ned looked at her earnestly. So we're to do nothing while he tries to usurp your son? Nothing while he steals your bannermen away? And what about my humiliation, my lord? Will you do nothing about that as well? Tears streamed down her cheeks. Cat, Jon would never try to usurp Robb. We have nothing to fear from him. He loves his family too much. As for this morning, I will speak to him and let him know how he should behave while he's here. Now, my lady, if there's nothing else. You're a fool, Ned. You'll see I'm right, and when you do, I hope it's before the bastard throws us all from our home. Cat said, storming out of the solar. She should have known her husband would do nothing, he was not a man of action. He was nothing like Brandon. He wouldn't have allowed a bastard to humiliate her or let him be raised alongside their children. If Brandon had lived, Jon Snow would have been Ned's problem alone, and he wouldn't have posed any threat to her children at all. She had no doubt that Brandon would have done whatever was necessary to protect their son's birthright. As she walked down the corridor, she heard loud laughter coming from the yard. Rushing to the nearest window, she looked down to see the bastard carrying her youngest daughter on his back, with Arya's laughter ringing out. Sansa was holding the Tyrell boy's arm, both of them laughing as they watched Jon pretend to be some kind of animal, though was it really just a pretense? Catelyn noticed her son and the Greyjoy boy looking on with disgust, and she smiled. At least her boy understood the truth of things. As she watched the bastard let her daughter down and then take off with her in pursuit, an idea sparked in her mind. She smiled as she glanced back at Robb. Of course, that was it. He would put the bastard in his place and show him for the lesser thing he truly was. Yes, she would speak to Robb later. Mama, look. Jon gave me this. Bran exclaimed, holding up a beautifully carved dragon. It's lovely, sweetling, she replied, turning to her baby boy with a smile. But your books are better, aren't they? No, Mama, dragon. Bran insisted, running down the corridor, making sounds she assumed were meant to imitate a dragon. She grimaced. Her daughters, her baby boy, the bastard was ingratiating himself with them all the while plotting to steal their birthright. Was there anything in this world more devious than a baseborn? Jaime walked past Jon's room and shook his head. He understood why Ned Stark would place him in his old room, thinking that his nephew would appreciate the familiar surroundings. But to Jaime, it showed that the man knew nothing. He had to know that. Jaime wouldn't have placed Jon in such a room at Casterly Rock. After 4 years, Ned's decision to do so only served to remind Jon of how little he had ever possessed while living there. Even worse, it showed a lack of understanding about how others would perceive the situation. Loras would certainly be affronted on Jon's behalf, and Daisy and her sisters wouldn't be pleased either. Just thinking of Daisy made Jaime miss her even more, prompting him to find a distraction. He considered sparring but ultimately decided to ensure his men were settled instead. He had sent Jors and Alrys, along with some of the men, to Wintertown. Only a few would remain at the keep, and although Jon's guards would be among them, Jaime knew they would manage the men far better than his own. He also needed to discuss with Ned Stark the simple fact that Jon had guards, which would likely not sit well with the Lord. Deciding to head into the small town himself to check on them, just to keep himself occupied, he made his way to the door leading to the stables. However, before he could leave, the maester approached him. My lord, a word if I may? Of course, maester. Luwin, my lord, the maester replied with a smile. Luwin, of course. How may I help you? There are some ravens for you, my lord, from Casterly Rock. Ah, good. Do you have them with you? I'm afraid not, my lord. I hadn't expected to see you yet, so I intended to bring them later. If you'll follow me, I'll get them for you. Very well. Jaime followed Luwin down the corridor and up the stairs to the rookery and the maester's quarters. More stairs awaited him before they reached the library itself, as Luwin explained. Upon entering the room, Jaime was surprised by the number of books scattered about. Crelin always kept his rooms neat and tidy, yet Luwin's space seemed organized in a different way. My lord, Luwin said, handing him a couple of scrolls. Jaime opened one. Jaime received 2 messages, one from Tyrion and another from his aunt. Brother, we've arrived back at the rock safe and sound, though not without a few scratches from that damnable cat. Slap Jon for me the next time you see him. I eagerly await your return and hope you are well. Tyrion. Nephew, I am glad to be home and I do not wish to travel that way again for a long time. I will ensure everything is well in your absence, but do not take too long, nephew. Your place is here with your family, and they miss you, as do I, Jenna. Jaime smiled as he read the messages. He had sent one raven from White Harbor, just as Jon had, and he'd also dispatched news of his upcoming wedding by raven from Castle Black. He knew replies would arrive while he was here. Deciding to send another message to let them know he had arrived safely, he asked the maester for some parchment and wrote it out. Can you send this for me, Maester? He asked. Of course, my lord, the Maester replied with a small smile. I thank you, Jaime said, turning to leave. My lord, may I ask you a question about Jon? The Maester inquired. Of course, Maester. The things I've read about, the shits, the wind wheels, even this latest thing with ice, are they true, my lord? They are, Maester. Jon is a very bright boy, his ideas have been invaluable, Jaime said, pride evident in his voice. Do you think he'd discuss them with me, my lord? I have some ideas of my own, ways I think things could be used, though I wish I had a better understanding of how these wind wheels work. I'm sure he would, Maester. I'll speak to him for you. As for the wind wheels, I'm certain Jon has some drawings of them, or if not, he could no doubt create some for you. Jon draws, my lord? The Maester asked, surprise in his voice. Aye, Maester. He's quite talented, as I'm sure you will see for yourself. I look forward to it, my lord. I thank you for your help. Think nothing of it, Maester. As he left the room, Jaime decided to go do what he had set out to do. Jaime was about to head out when the Maester interrupted him. Stepping outside, he walked through the yard, searching for the stables. As he looked around, laughter echoed from the main courtyard, prompting him to investigate. He couldn't help but laugh himself at the sight before him. Jon was chasing his young cousin, making loud snorting sounds that sent the girl into fits of giggles. Her sister and Loras stood nearby, watching the playful chaos. Every so often, Jon would pause and pretend to lunge at his older cousin, who would quickly take refuge behind Loras, ready to protect her from whatever beast Jon was pretending to be. He seems happy, a voice behind him remarked. It was Ned Stark. Aye, he is, my lord. Ned, Jaime replied with a smirk. I haven't seen my two daughters have such fun in ages. Jon has a way with people, especially those younger than him. He and my cousin Joy are inseparable at times, and he and Loras make time to train and play with my other young cousins, too. With live steel? Ned asked, his tone growing serious. No, Jon only uses tourney swords when training the children. But he and Loras have been using live steel for quite a few moons now. He's too young, Ned said, moving even closer. Is he? I've seen him wield a blade for over 4 years. There isn't a boy in the realm as skilled as he is, both for his age and even those older. I doubt anyone will come close to him, not even in the lists. In a year or two, even they won't be a match for him. Jaime chuckled as Jon suddenly fell to the ground, both girls jumping on him and smearing mud across his face. What happened in King's Landing? Ned asked, once his laughter subsided. Jon put a fish in its place. Perhaps you should follow his example, my lord, Jaime said, walking away before Ned could respond. Loras, Jon's sisters, or were they cousins? No, to Jon, they were sisters, and watching him with them made it hard for Jaime to think of them any other way. His own sisters were as different as could be. Sansa reminded him of. Marjorie was the epitome of politeness, refinement, and ladylike grace. In contrast, Arya, though younger and less proper, was anything but conventional. Loras doubted she would ever conform to societal expectations. While Sansa adhered to the rules of courtesy, her sister seemed to scoff at them, embodying a wild spirit that Loras found instantly endearing. His brother, however, was the complete opposite of the two girls, impolite, unrefined, and far from lordly. But given that he spent so much time with an Ironborn, Loras shouldn't have been surprised. He had always believed the Northerners despised the Ironborn. Lady Dacey, her sisters, Ser Jorah, and his aunt made their disdain for them abundantly clear. These marauders had raided the north for years, and Loras knew they had even attacked some of his cousin's ships. Yet, the Ironborn strutted around Winterfell as if they were visiting lords rather than hostages. Not even a ward would walk through their foster home with such arrogance. While Jon played with his younger sister, Loras observed them from the edges of the yard, chuckling at their antics. That was so much fun. Sansa exclaimed, her voice ringing out before she shrieked as a mud-covered Jon approached her. Come here, little sister, give your brother a hug. Jon called, and Loras couldn't help but laugh as Sansa hid behind him once more. Oh, you really shouldn't do that, Loras, Jon warned, wiping some mud from his hands and pretending to aim it at Loras. Don't, Jon, please. Sansa giggled, clearly enjoying the playful banter. Very well, little sister, but this isn't over, Jon said with a grin as he and Arya headed toward his room. Arya didn't flinch when Jon pretended to smear mud on her face, though he never actually did. Lady Sansa, shall we? Loras asked, and Sansa giggled as she linked her arm with his. Just then, a voice called out from behind him, Tyrell. Loras turned to see Robb and Theon approaching. His name is Loras, Sansa said firmly, still holding onto his arm. I'm sorry, my lady, Loras, Theon said mockingly. What, Greyjoy? Loras replied, a smirk on his face, which made Sansa laugh openly. We were wondering if you'd like to join us for a spar, Robb said, flashing a charming smile. I'm afraid I'll have to decline, Lord Robb. I have a previous engagement, you see, a lady who needs escorting, Loras replied, and he and Sansa began to walk away. Ladies and bastards, you keep odd company, Tyrell, Robb called out, laughing. Sansa tightened her grip on his arm. Far better company than squids, though, Loras said as he walked away, muttering under his breath. Thank you, Sansa said softly. For what, my lady? Loras asked, glancing back at her. For not fighting with them. As I said, I had a previous engagement, Loras replied, and Sansa smiled at him. They made their way to Jon's room, and Loras was surprised to find how far it was from everyone else's quarters. When they arrived, he was even more taken aback by how different it was from his own. Though Loras's room was not as luxurious as his quarters in Highgarden or the Rock, it was vastly superior to this one. It irritated him that his friend was placed here, and it infuriated him that the rightful king was given such accommodations. This was my old room, it's good to be back in it, Jon said, smiling when Loras looked at him. Is it? Loras asked. Aye, it is, Jon replied. Before Loras could say more, Arya burst into the room, followed closely by a servant carrying paper, charcoal, ink, and quills. What's that for? Sansa asked, her curiosity piqued. Jon's drawing me, Arya said, beaming. Drawing you what? Sansa asked, confusion evident in her voice. Drawing me, Arya insisted, and thankfully, Jon clarified before Sansa could grow annoyed by her sister's lack of explanation. Arya asked me if I drew people because of her book, so when I said I did, she wanted me to draw her. Can you draw me too? Sansa asked, her eyes lighting up with interest. Sansa asked excitedly, of course. But I'll need colored ink. For what? Sansa replied, a little puzzled. Your hair, stupid. Arya giggled. Loras noticed Sansa caught between annoyance at Arya for calling her stupid and her eagerness to get the ink. Let's go get the ink, Sansa, Loras encouraged. All right. By the time they returned from the maester's quarters, Jon had nearly finished Arya's picture. It was incredible, though Jon mentioned he would create an even better one before he left. Arya, however, was too busy admiring her drawing to hear him. Sansa sat down next, and Jon took his time perfecting her portrait. Just as he finished, a servant arrived to announce that dinner would be served soon. Here, all done, Jon said, handing Sansa the picture. Jon, it's wonderful. Thank you, brother, Sansa exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that lingered for a long moment. I'll need to do another so I can bring it with me, Jon said, and Sansa nodded in agreement. He and Jon then escorted the two girls back to their rooms to prepare for dinner. After leaving them, Jon walked Loras back to his own room. "Are you sure you're all right about the room, Jon? I mean..." Loras hesitated. "I don't think he meant anything by it, Loras. I think he thought it was a nice gesture." "Anyway, I'll see you for dinner," Jon replied, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder before heading back to his room. Perhaps that's what Jon intended, but Loras couldn't shake the feeling that if Jon had grown up here, he would have felt like an outsider, part of the family but still apart from it. It seemed his brother had already made up his mind about Jon's place in their lives, while his sisters obviously disagreed. For Loras, it was the realization that Lord Stark hadn't fully embraced Jon as family that weighed heavily on him. He quickly dressed for dinner, briefly considering wearing the red shirt and black clothing to represent his family's colors. But in the end, he wore his usual dark clothing. Black really was his color. As he tied the favor to his belt, he smirked at his own foolishness. When Arya had asked him to draw her earlier, he had done it easily. Even Sansa had been no trouble at all. But they weren't the only girls in his life, and he couldn't understand why he hadn't thought to draw the others before now. Perhaps it was partly due to the lack of colored inks. The picture of his mother, which he usually kept with his father's letters, was dark and drawn with a single ink. Arya's was similar, but Sansa's had felt incomplete without red. Now he realized he would need purple for his sister's eyes and the right shade of brown for Marjorie's hair. Black ink would only distort their images. Today had been incredible, and he wished his entire time here could be this much fun. But deep down, he knew he had been hiding, partly from his uncle, and that would change soon. More importantly, he was hiding from the place he knew he would have to go. Shaking his head, he decided to enjoy the meal as much as he could. Everything else would take care of itself. "Are you still not ready?" Loras called as he opened his door. "No, I'm good." "Is that what you're wearing?" Jon snickered. "What? What's wrong with it?" "This is my best outfit," Loras replied, looking worried. "Oh, the outfit's fine, it's the idiot wearing it," Jon joked, but he was too slow to duck the slap Loras landed on him. "Ow. You do know I could have your hand for that?" Jon laughed. "Then how would I protect you, my king?" "A one-handed swordsman, what use is that?" Loras chuckled. "Come on, my little sister no doubt awaits your company." Jon, Loras stammered. "I know, Loras. I really appreciate how nice you've been to her." "It's my pleasure, Jon. I like them both." Me too." They left the room, and Jon locked the door behind him, having hidden the. Jon found his father's letters hidden away in his old spot. Better safe than sorry, he thought, but he still didn't want anyone rummaging through his other belongings. Before heading to the Great Hall, he and Loras decided to check on Mira and Jojen in the guest wing. He hadn't seen them since his arrival and felt a bit concerned about Mira's illness. "Can I come in?" Jon asked, knocking on the door that Loras had pointed out. "Jon, is that you?" Jojen's voice came from inside. "Aye," Jon replied as he opened the door. Mira lay asleep in bed, while Jojen had pulled up a chair and was reading one of the books he'd received from Eamon, keeping a watchful eye on his sister. Jon approached him, noticing that Jojen didn't seem too distressed. "Is she all right?" Jon asked. "She's just tired, Jon. She hasn't been sleeping well in the tents, so she needs some rest." "Are you sure? Did Luwin look at her?" "Aye, he did, but she barely remembers. I thought I'd stay here in case she wakes up confused." "Ah, all right. Have you eaten?" I did." "You go eat, Jon. We'll see you on the morrow," Jojen said with a smile. "Are you sure? I can stay if you'd like." "No, go be with your family." "Thanks, though." "All right, see you on the morrow." Good night, John. Good night, Jojen. Good night, Mira, he said, glancing at the bed and nodding before stepping out. Loras had waited outside while John spoke to Jojen, and when John left the room, he looked to Loras and nodded, signaling that they were fine. Together, they made their way to the Great Hall. John was relieved that his uncle hadn't decided on a formal feast. There would be no dancing or music tonight. Instead, it was just family, Jaime, Loras, and the household. As they entered the Great Hall, John nodded at some familiar faces he hadn't seen in years: Ser Roderick, Vayen Poole, Maester Luwin, Hullen, and Mikken. He smirked at the surprised looks from the Septa and Septon as he walked past. When he was younger, he thought all 7 of them hated him, but he soon realized that it mattered more where they were from. The Septon at Casterly Rock paid him no attention, nor did the one in Lannisport. Surprisingly, he actually liked the one Jerian had chosen for Castamere. It seemed that only these 2 truly despised him. His little sister was practically waving her hand off, urging him and Loras to hurry up and take their seats beside her. Arya moved from the other side of the table to give Loras her seat and sat beside him as he settled next to Sansa. Loras smiled as he took his place beside Bran and a small girl he didn't recognize, who he later learned was Jane Poole, the steward's daughter. A few seats away, his brother was engaged in conversation with the Greyjoy boy, and John could see them both snickering and joking while occasionally glancing his way. He felt disappointed in his brother. Now he understood why Jory and the guards never spoke of Robb when he asked. Robb was spoiled, arrogant, and cocky. But he was still Jon's brother, and he would try to get along with him. Jon glanced over to see Jaime talking to their uncle and aunt, who wore a painted-on smile while speaking to the Lord. Yet, she still shot him her usual disapproving looks whenever their eyes met. "We're having steak and kidney pie with peas and gravy," Sansa said, smiling at him as she took a slice of the pie in front of her. "Gods, I missed Gage's pies," Jon said longingly. "Do you not get pies where you live, Jon?" Arya asked, her eyes wide. "No, little wolf, no pies in the West." "At least none as good as Gage's," Jon replied, and Arya shook her head in horror at the thought. "You should stay here then," she said determinedly. "You could teach me how to use the bow you're making for me." "What's that?" "You're making a bow for a little girl, Snow," Robb said, laughing. It seems unlike some people. Arya actually appreciates gifts," Loras chimed in loudly. "What's that you say?" his uncle asked. "Nothing, my lord," Loras replied, noticing the glare Jon shot his way. "We were just talking about Snow making Arya a bow, father," Robb interjected. "I think you're too young for such a thing, young lady," their uncle said, and Jon couldn't help but disagree. "I believe you're never too young to learn something new, my lord. If my sister wishes it, she should learn to wield a bow, or a sword," Jon said, looking directly at his uncle, while Arya nodded in agreement. "We'll discuss this tomorrow, Jon," his uncle replied, locking eyes with him. "As you wish, my lord," Jon responded. "Will you really teach me?" Arya asked, leaning against him. "I will, little wolf. Now eat up, you'll need to be bigger and stronger to wield a sword, won't you?" Jon laughed as Arya hurriedly swallowed her food. "Arya, slow down," Sansa chided from beside him, as bits of crust began to fall onto her lap from Arya's mouth. The meal was one of the best he'd had in years. He, Loras, and Bran chatted about their sparring practices, while he also made sure to give each of his sisters as much attention as he could. After the meal, Arya dashed over to their father to show him the picture he'd drawn of her, which prompted Sansa to head back to her room for her own drawing. Even their mother smiled at the pictures, though she still gave him that familiar look. Jon decided to use the excuse of being overly tired from their travels to do as he wished, ignoring the snide remarks from Robb and the Greyjoy boy. He felt a sense of satisfaction seeing the annoyance on his uncle's face at their behavior. He bid goodnight to everyone, but before he could leave, his uncle stood up and walked part of the way back to his room with him. "It's good to see you well, son. I hope you know that," his uncle said. "I do, Lord Stark," Jon replied, and he noticed his uncle grimace slightly. "We should talk tomorrow, Jon. We have much to discuss." "That we do. Lord, if you'll forgive me, I'm most tired," Jon said. "Oh, of course. Good night, Jon." "Good night, my lord," Jon replied as he unlocked the door and stepped into his room. He waited a few minutes, ensuring his uncle had returned to the hall, before leaving. Jaime had given Jors and Allers the night off, not having yet discussed his guards with his uncle, so Jon found himself alone in the corridor. He moved quickly, slipping outside without any trouble. As he crept through the shadows, he almost made it all the way unnoticed, but then Ghost appeared in front of him. "Where've you been, boy?" he whispered, rubbing the wolf's white fur. "Come on, we've got somewhere to go." It didn't take long for Jon to reach the crypts. He picked up an unlit torch and lit it from the one nearest the door. As he walked past the statues, he stopped first at his grandfather's. Closing his eyes, he leaned in to touch it, silently offering a few words before moving on to his Uncle Brandon's statue, repeating the gesture. Placing the torch against the wall, he turned to face his mother's statue. Reaching into his pocket, he took out the winter rose and placed it gently in her open hands. The statue before him was a dull likeness of the woman he remembered. He pulled out her picture from inside his shirt and compared it to the statue, feeling a pang of disappointment. The artist had failed to capture the light in her eyes, her spirit, her fierceness. Looking back and forth between the picture and the statue, he thought that if they wanted to embody his mother, they would have done better to create a statue of Arya instead of this. "I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't know. If I had, I would have come sooner, I swear it," Jon murmured, feeling tears begin to flow. "I don't know if he would have told me. I might have gone my whole life not knowing who you are, not knowing how close you were. As it is, I've gone 10 years without you, and every day I wake up wishing you were here with me. I'm doing it, Mother, doing what you." "Jon," she said, "what do you want me to do?" "I will be the king the realm needs," Jon replied, determination in his voice. "I will fulfill your promise. I swear it on the old gods and the new. I swear it. I love you, Mother, now and forever." Ignoring the tears streaming down his face, he felt Ghost stir beside him. Jon reached out and rubbed his hand through the wolf's fur, but then he quickly turned at the sound of footsteps that felt far too close. "Your mother would have loved you with everything she had. It was the only way she knew how to love," Old Nan continued, her voice gentle. "I miss her every day. I miss when wolves roamed these halls, when a she-wolf refused to be cowed. For many years, I've waited for the white wolf to return, for the pack to be whole once more. Only you can do it, young pup. You are not only the prince that was promised, not only a dragon, you are a wolf, Jon Snow. The blood of the kings of winter flows through your veins, and the time has come for you to howl." Old Nan smiled as she bent down to rub Ghost, her eyes filled with warmth.